thought he could rewrite his destiny across an ocean, but the ocean just spit him back out. That's the whisper racing through palace corridors, embassy hallways, and Montecito dinner parties all at once. A prince who once ran from the crown is now rumored to be running out of road, and this time, there's no red carpet, no royal motorcade, no carefully managed rescue mission waiting at the end of it. The story exploding behind closed doors is brutally simple. His grand American chapter, the deals, the documentaries, the speeches about freedom has hit a wall. Not a dramatic Hollywood wall you smash through in slow motion. A cold, bureaucratic, paperwork kind of wall. A kind that doesn't care about titles, trauma, or trending hashtags. Suddenly, the man who left Britain declaring independence is facing the possibility of returning not as a conquering global figure, but as someone with nowhere else left to stand. And what makes it sting even more? The silence from the family he once accused of silencing him. Because while his California life is rumored to be wobbling, the royal machine back home hasn't paused for a second. It's moving, evolving, smiling for cameras, shaking hands, cutting ribbons, all without him. The message isn't shouted. It's colder than that. It's absence. Behind the scenes, insiders claim the calls for help didn't start loud. They started careful. Quiet outreach, old contacts, gentle feelers through mutual friends and former aides. The tone at first was practical, logistical. What are the options? What would a return even look like? But options, it seems, are a luxury you lose when bridges have already gone up in smoke. Because every emotional interview, every headline-grabbing accusation, every public retelling of private family pain didn't just sell books, it burned trust. And trust in royal circles is currency. Once it's gone, you don't get an overdraft. So when the reality of his situation reportedly began to close in, the response from the palace wasn't rage. It wasn't even revenge. It was distance, polite, immaculate, devastating distance. No public statements rushing to defend him. No behind-the-scenes lobbying anyone can point to. No visible sign that the institution he walked away from is scrambling to bring him back into the fold. For the first time in his life, the safety net looks like it's been folded up and stored away. And then there's the other layer, the one people whisper about but rarely say out loud. His marriage, once branded as the ultimate love story against the world, now sits under a microscope of pressure. Because when everything is soaring, unity is easy. When everything is collapsing at once, reputation, money rumors, legal stress, public opinion, cracks don't just show, they echo. Sources love to paint the scene like a movie. Tense late-night conversations, competing strategies, one side wanting to fight louder, go more public, push harder, the other suddenly exhausted, wondering if the war with the world has cost more than it was ever worth. And hanging over it all is one brutal emotional twist. The idea that if he does return, he may have to do it alone. Alone, not in the literal sense of having no one on earth, but alone in the symbolic way that cuts deepest. No grand family reunion on the palace steps. No triumphant restoration. Just a quiet re-entry into a country that once adored him, now watching with raised eyebrows instead of open arms. Back in Britain, the contrast is almost theatrical. The future of the monarchy is being rolled out in soft, focused public appearances, the next generation stepping forward, senior royals doubling down on duty, tradition being polished and presented as steady, stable, unshaken. It's a visual narrative that doesn't need to mention him to make its point. The firm is fine. The show goes on. The spare who left? Replaceable. And that may be the hardest pill of all. Because for years, his identity was built on being the insider who knew the system, the son of the king, the brother of the future monarch. Even when he criticized it, he was still defined by it. Now he's facing a world where that identity doesn't automatically open doors, and the institution he once said he didn't need is proving it can survive just fine without him. People close to the situation say there's a deep private grief under the drama. Not just fear about logistics or headlines, but a quieter realization you can't go back to the exact place you left. Even if the plane lands on the same soil, the relationships, the trust, the roles, they've all shifted. And the public? They're split between fascination and fatigue. Some still see a man crushed by a system too rigid to bend. Others see someone who set fire to his own lifeboat and is now shocked the water is cold. Sympathy and skepticism are battling it out in comment sections and living rooms everywhere. What's undeniable is the symbolism. A prince who once renounced the structure he was born into, now circling back toward it under pressure, feels less like a comeback and more like a reckoning. Not the fairy tale kind. The grown-up kind, where choices echo longer than applause ever did. The cruel irony is that the one thing he always said he wanted, control over his own life, is now exactly what he has. No palace handlers, no institution to blame, just his decisions, his path, and the consequences playing out in real time on the world stage. And And as the rumors grow louder about an exit, a flight, a return that doesn't look anything like the departure, one question hangs heavier than any headline. If you walk away from a crown and then lose the world you ran to, where do you actually belong? By the time the rumors reached a roar, it wasn't the headlines that hurt the most, it was the silence in between them. Because in the gaps where statements should have been, where clarifications might have come, there was nothing. No firm denials, no passionate defenses, no dramatic rescue from across the Atlantic. Just carefully managed distance and a man standing in the middle of a storm he once believed he could control. In California, the sunshine suddenly felt less like freedom and more like exposure. Every calf visit, every school run, every quiet drive became potential footage, potential commentary, potential proof for strangers that they knew exactly what was happening inside a life they had never lived. And when the world smells uncertainty, it circles. Friends, or at least the kind of friends fame attracts, reportedly began to thin out. Invitations got more cautious. Conversations more guarded. It wasn't cruelty. It was self-preservation. Nobody wants to be tied too closely to a narrative that feels like it's unraveling in real time. Inside the house, though, the real drama wasn't playing out in front of cameras. It was playing out in long, heavy silences. Two people who once stood shoulder to shoulder against the world now facing the terrifying possibility that the world might not be the only thing closing in. Because pressure like this doesn't just test love, it tests blame. Whose idea was the big leap? Whose strategy was the tell-all? Who pushed for more exposure when quiet might have healed more? When life is glamorous, those questions stay buried under premieres and applause. When life feels like it's shrinking, they come up like cracks in glass. Meanwhile, across the ocean, the contrast couldn't have been sharper if it were scripted. Royal engagements rolled on with almost eerie smoothness. Smiles, handshakes, polished speeches about duty and service. The message wasn't spoken, but it was visible. The institution doesn't wobble just because one person steps out of line. And that visual stability, that calm continuation hit harder than any direct rejection ever could, because it suggested something deeply unsettling. Not that he had been hated, but that he had been absorbed and replaced. For someone raised inside that system, that realization is brutal. You grow up believing you are an essential piece of the story. Then one day you look back and the story is still moving, just without your name in the chapter titles. Whispers in royal circles describe a family torn between private emotion and public discipline. A father who may still ache in quiet moments but understands that monarchy runs on precedent, not feelings. A brother who once shared bunk beds and jokes, now carrying the weight of a future crown, knowing that every move he makes sets an example that will echo for decades. Reconciliation, people say, isn't impossible, but it's no longer simple. It's no longer a hug on an airport tarmac. It would mean conditions, boundaries, humility, and the swallowing of pride on a scale most people never have to face. And pride has always been part of this story. The pride of wanting to protect your partner at all costs. The pride of refusing to feel second best. The pride of believing you could build something bigger, freer, better than the centuries-old machine you walked away from. Now that pride is reportedly being weighed against reality, against children who will one day Google everything, against the question of where home really is when two continents both feel complicated. Public opinion has shifted in a way that's almost dizzying. The same crowds that once cheered rebellion are now split. Some still see a man who dared to break the mold and got punished for it. Others see someone who confused attention with support and is now discovering the difference the hard way. The cruelest twist is that both versions might hold a piece of the truth, because you can be both wounded and responsible, both misunderstood and mistaken, both brave for leaving and naive about what leaving would cost. Late at night, insiders say, the biggest fear isn't money or status or even reputation. It's legacy. How this chapter will be told years from now, whether he'll be remembered as the prince who modernized his own path or the one who walked away from everything and couldn't find solid ground anywhere else. And then there are the children, blissfully unaware of the weight their last name carries in adult conversations. They are the quiet center of every whispered strategy, every what-if scenario. Stay. Go. Fight. Retreat. Every option is measured against their future, their identity, their sense of belonging. Because whatever happens next, they will grow up with two truths: a royal heritage that is complicated and a very public family story that the world thinks it understands. Back in Britain, the future of the monarchy is being framed in softer, safer images. Youth initiatives, community work, continuity. It's a visual reassurance to the public that the crown is steady, dependable, moving forward. And in that forward motion, there's less and less space space for unresolved drama from the past. That may be the part that stings deepest. Not exile, not criticism, but irrelevance. To go from global fascination to cautious footnote is a fall no one prepares you for, especially when you were born into a life where cameras were as constant as oxygen. Now, as speculation swirls about returns, resets, and quiet negotiations that may or may not be happening behind closed doors, one emotional truth sits at the center of it all. You can leave a family, a country, an institution, but you can't leave the consequences of how you left. And if he does step back onto British soil in a more permanent way, it won't be the end of the story. It will be the start of a very different one. Less glitter, less defiance, more humility, more boundaries. A life not of dramatic exits, but of careful, measured steps under watchful eyes. The fairy tale version of independence is loud and cinematic. The real version can be quiet, complicated, and humbling beyond words. Somewhere between the palace gates and the California coastline, a man who once had two worlds at his feet is now trying to figure out how to stand in just one without losing himself completely. And that, more than any headline, is the part no one can spin.